Hello, everyone, and welcome to Finding Solutions Technology. Today, we're going to be covering variables and exactly the types of different types of variables. So, first things first, let's take a look at how variables are stored in the memory. I'd like to give you an example of this using this illustration here. So, picture a box in the memory or several boxes in the memory that store the unique value of a variable when you initialize that variable. And essentially, a variable is just an empty container that or empty box that you give value to, and it stores that value. And the value may vary, hence the term variable. So we have three different values here that's stored in the memory. 8.2, which we would initialize and declare as a double or a long in Java, and then that initialized value of 8.2 will be stored in the memory with a unique location and address here for reference. The same thing would go for a variable that's declared and initialized with a string type and string type value of name here. And then the same thing would go for a variable that is declared and initialized as an int and initialized with the value of 15. So these three different variable values are unique in location and are referenced by that specific variable only. So these all have different addresses. So let's go to our IDE. We're going to be using Eclipse for this example today. Please go ahead and create your package or project if you haven't already. Go ahead and create a package and then go ahead and create your first class. You can name it whatever you like. You can also name your package whatever you like for the purposes of this demonstration here. So first things first, let's go ahead and create an instance variable. We're going to call it int num of shoes. It's an instance variable because it's class level, which means it's in the class body, and we just declared it, which means when an object reference of this class here, examples of variables is created, what's going to happen is that class will have the ability to provide value in that instance. So we have that instance variable here. The other type of variable I want to show you guys is a static variable. A static variable is essentially a variable that is staple to the class. It's global, which means it's accessed. It can be accessed in other classes as well, in that it uses the static keyword. So let's go ahead and say public static int, which is going to be the type of variable that we're creating, and let's just call it people. So as you guys notice, we can use the static variable that is declared and can be initialized when the instance of this class is created, or it can just be called directly as well. And then that child class can also provide value based on that. Or we can do something like this, which is make it a constant, which means that value is expected to be the same no matter what. So this is when we declare and initialize it within the same class, and this is also acceptable as well. So let's go ahead and just leave it as something that's declared and not initialized. We're going to make another class where we actually provide value to the people variable here. The other type of variable that I like to show you guys is something called a local variable. So local variable essentially is a variable that's local to that method or within that scope of that method. So let's create a method called public void num of people. And so inside of this body here, inside of this code block here, we're going to define a variable, and we're going to give it a int declaration or type, and we're going to call it people people names or number of shoes people have. So we have a declaration here, and we can either just declare it within inside of the scope of the body. And as you guys can see, it even states here the value of the local variable. So it's complaining because we haven't assigned it a value yet, but you can do this inside of a local variable. Um, and then if you like, you can also just give it a value as well. That also works. But for the purpose of this, we're just going to declare it. Now, let me show you guys an example here. So if I were to copy this, notice how it complains. It's a duplicate, right? So you cannot duplicate variables at all. You have to give a variable a different name, um, because you have to point it and give it different memory allocation, right? So that's an example of you cannot duplicate. However, let's try to duplicate this one within the same block. You should get the same issue. You cannot duplicate, right? Because it's within the same scope. But this, let me prove to you guys that local variables cannot be seen with outside of the scope of that method. So if I were to take this and then put it outside of that method, notice how it doesn't complain, even though it has the same exact name. Even though, see how this is complaining here. The thing is, if it's outside of the block, then no other method can see that method. No other variable in the program, the class doesn't see what's inside of this block here because it's local. It's a local variable. We can use the same thing out here because it also doesn't see what's inside of this method body here. So that's kind of to show you guys how the internal workings of the local variable kind of works. So let's see if we can make it static. The rule is you cannot use static. You cannot make a local variable static because static by default is something that you use to make it accessible to other classes, right? So that goes against the rules as well. So you cannot have a local variable that's static, and you also cannot provide an access modifier like public, private, etc. to a local variable because that goes against the point of it being a local variable. So illegal modifier parameter. So you cannot make a local variable static or provide an access modifier to it. Okay. So let's go ahead and make a test class here. You can do so by clicking on your package, going to new, and then locating and creating class. We're just going to call this test class. So in our test class, we're going to need a main method to execute. You can do so by typing in main and then holding on control shift or control, I'm sorry, not shift, control space bar, double clicking or just pressing enter there. Okay, now let's do the example of providing a value to the static variable here, people. So static is a part of the class. Remember, guys, it's stapled to the class. So by using the class name, we can just reference that variable. Same thing works for methods of what that's static as well, but we're going to cover that later. So examples of variables, and then use the dot operator. And note we have the variable people here referenced that we can call. So example of peoples dot people, and then now we can provide a value to this variable within this class. Let's just say 50. Okay. So now let's do a system out print line. The shortcut for that is sys out and then control space bar. And then we just want to reference here. Note, nothing complaints here. So we set the value within a different class without creating a object reference. So, so let's just go ahead and save and execute this. And note we get 50 as the output because we were able to successfully declare the static variable in a different class, but initialize it in the class we were calling it from. So that's a little bit in the basics about the three different types of variables. Please, guys, go ahead and practice this on your own. See exactly what the scopes are, the different variables, where you can call the variables from, and what are the restrictions as well. Um, that's all I pretty much have for you guys on this video. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.